right, everyone, it's Monday and we are back in the shop. Friday afternoon, I placed an order with Bellmetric for some more hardware because we had run out of the M12 hardware for all the rear suspension arms and control arms and everything. So I ordered some more M12 70mm. Initially, I had ordered 10 70mm lengths and 10 60s. Thinking that that's all I needed, and turns out we actually need a few more 70mm lengths than 60s. I really actually wanted to get all 65, but they didn't have that length as an option at Bellmetric. So anyway, this morning I went to where their location is in Tingsboro, Mass. It's about an hour and a half round trip, and I got some more M12 by 1.25 for the hubs to the knuckles, rear knuckles. And then I also got these countersunk Allen heads for the Mazworks Z32 transmission adapter for the bell housing. Hopefully that's good for a little while. I'll probably still need to get some more hardware, but either way, I got it. Keep us rolling for today and get this thing rolling, literally the chassis. All right, all of the powder coat on the subframe tightened all of these flanges up. So we're needing to separate them a little bit to get all this, most of the suspension arms on here. So gotta come in here and hopefully just lightly press them out. If we're lucky, don't damage the paint. Problem is now they're reinforced too. So now they don't fucking bend so easily. Exactly what I didn't want to do. Chip the fucking paint. Can't this shit just be easy, dude? All right, so we are trying to mount up the rear lower control arm and the pickup point to mount them on the subframe. Both of them are a lot tighter. At first, I thought it was just because of the paint, the powder coat, but I'm realizing now that they're tighter than they should have been when before it even got paint. And with the GK Tech anti-squat that got welded in, it was definitely too tight initially. I should have opened it up before it went to paint. And then also the GK Tech weld-in reinforcements for the subframe, like right here. I don't know if you can see, I know it's dark, but yeah, this guy right here, that is now not allowing me to separate the pickup point, expand it to a larger opening to get the control arm on there. So now I'm gonna have to come in with the angle grinder and ruin the fresh paint job, unfortunately. And I'm just gonna cut a slit in the reinforcement, the little triangle that's welded there. Cut a slit in it and then separate it as much as we need to get the control arm up there and bolt it in. And then I'm just gonna have to re-weld it. And unfortunately, that little area won't be powder coated all fresh and nicely anymore. I'll just have to touch it up with some black spray paint. But anyway, gonna get to cutting. Let's go. All right, we got that sucker cut out, and now hopefully it will be enough to separate it enough, and we can get the lower control arm bolted up. Let's go. All right, everyone, so quick recap. I pretty much have the entire driver side finished, the driver rear corner assembled, and I just wanted to give a recap, also explain something else that I don't think I explained earlier. So, you know, I was dealing with getting the control arm to fit in the subframe, and I realized that the anti-squat is obviously GK Tech, and I have PBM suspension here, arms, lower control arm and everything. And I think the reason the PBM wasn't fitting in there is because, well, they're different manufacturers. GK Tech, I imagine their lower control arm is a little bit more narrower, the Heims that is, and the collars that fit in the Heims. So I guess technically I could have put them on a machine, a lathe or a mill, and like milled the Heim inserts or collars that go in on each side and then that would have, you know, shrunk it in a little bit narrower, but I kind of don't really have time for that. So I got that situated as you saw earlier. And then also something else that I had to do, and I'm not sure you guys are going to be able to really see. It's kind of dark in here. I don't think I was saying it correctly or knew the name of it earlier, but the anchor bolt for the Z32 drum brakes, that big stud in the rear of the hub here, right here, this guy, that kind of interferes with the shank and the nut of the lower control arm that comes up here. I'm gonna try to give you a view of it on the camera, but it's kind of difficult to see. It's kind of dark in there, but yeah, right there, as you can see, maybe right here, right in between there is like, I don't know, maybe a centimeter of clearance. And so what I ended up having to do, because the nut here is so tall, it's a nylon inserted nut, lock nut. So I ended up having to come through. I just put it in vice grips. I'll actually record when I do this one. Put it in vice grips and just cut it down. Probably cut like a third of it off and shrunk it down a little bit more narrow. And then I was able to get it on the anchor stud. And then for the shank on the lower control arm, I stuffed that up through the knuckle, and then as it just broke out of the knuckle a little bit, I just had to screw the nut on as I pushed the shank up into it, because the clearance is that small. I hope I explained that correctly. So basically you just have to cut this down, and then you can't use a washer for the shank. I just use the nylon lock nut for the shank on the lower control arm. And yeah, so a little bit of a pain, but it works. And yeah, so I'm gonna have to move on to the passenger side and complete that. And I'll do a little bit more recording of that so you can see everything involved. All right, everyone, so I was a little bit smarter on the passenger side here. I took a step back and thought about it, and instead of kind of destroying my fresh powder coat paint job on my subframe here, I thought about it and ran down to my brother's house. He threw one of the spacers on the lathe and took a little bit off of it. Roughly 1.5 millimeters, and that sucked it in a little bit. So now, instead of separating the pickup point on the subframe here, it's just going to pretty much slip right in there, and I won't have to separate the pickup point and smash the brand new paint job that I have. So much nicer than the other side on the driver's side, which I basically destroyed and chipped all my paint off. So yeah, pretty happy about that. All right, bolting the hub up on the passenger side here. I got some fresh M12 by 1.25 hardware. I also got them flanged. It's kind of like a washer built into it. That's what it's called, flanged. But I had to make sure that they worked on the knuckle, because the old factory nuts from Nissan, or factory bolts, they aren't flanged, and they do kind of have to fit in an area that it's like recessed from the entire knuckle where the hardware goes into. So I had to make sure that these weren't too wide or big in diameter. So I'll actually take the camera and show you what I mean. It'll be a lot easier. There's not too much room right here, So I really just wanted to make sure the flanged bolt was gonna fit within there. It's torque time! All right, so my buddy Tommy Roberts, who runs the same setup, he told me he measures his lower control arms to about 1.5 inches from the lower control arm out to the end of the threads. So I'm gonna measure that with my digital caliper and then poke her up into the knuckle. Back in my shop today, and now that the rear is pretty much done, buttoned up, almost ready to put the wheels on the rear. I just have to clean up the rotors a little bit. I started to clean them up with a wire wheel. First one came out pretty well. I'll show you here. There was just a lot of surface rust on it. And yeah, so I definitely needed to clean them up before I put them back on. So yeah, I took just a little wire wheel here. I just popped this on my drill and went around, and it cleaned it up really well. And so yeah, once the rotors are done, I can put them on the rear and then put wheels on. And then now I am focusing on the front, and I'm pretty much done with the driver's side here, as you can see. I got it all bolted up. I haven't torqued the hub on yet, so I still have that to do. And then of course the front rotors that I got to clean up and put on here before I put the wheels on and get this thing rolling. Yeah, again, all PBM, suspension arms, tension rod. I think it's a 50 millimeter extended lower control arm, which is pretty huge. Curious to see how much of a poke my front wheels have now, because they already had some previously, because I had extended the factory S13 lower control arms. I don't know how much they were extended though, so this should be interesting to see. And then of course the PBM, super angle, drop knuckles, and BC coils. So now that this is good, I'm gonna focus on the other side, getting the passenger side on. This was pretty straightforward. Didn't have to do anything special to the front here. Tommy did tell me that he had to, for the subframe, for the bolt that goes through the subframe holding the control arm on, he did have to cut this off, this little nipple of the bolt shank that's sticking out of the nut there. He said he cut it off flush with the nut, and that's honestly probably for the dust boot, so it doesn't rip the dust boot when the steering rack is going lock to lock drifting. Because yeah, other than that, I don't see an issue with it right now, but I don't have dust boots on, so once I have dust boots on, I'm sure I'm gonna realize why he cut that tip of the bolt off. That's pretty much it for the driver's side, so now I'm just going to get the passenger side together. So let's go. All right, I'm gonna start with the lower control arm. By now, I think you guys know how much I like anti-seize. And just about every nut and bolt on this thing is getting anti-seize, unless I feel the need to Loctite something, which I haven't really found anything yet that I've put on. So the only thing for the suspension I'll be doing once it's aligned and everything is torqued down actually. Once I align it, I will paint mark every nut and bolt to the chassis, to the subframe, for an easier nut and bolt check basically. Just because once you paint mark it, you'll see if it's moved or not from its original tighten locations. Getting the inner tie rod on. It says it's an S14 inner on the box. Not sure what the difference is. Might be different length. Gotta just tap this thing in here. Put a little microfiber over it so we don't chip the paint. I think I said this earlier in the video, these two bolts are tapered. They have like a special taper to them. I guess the taper doesn't matter so much. When I think about it, it's probably more the diameter of the actual bolt and there not being any slop. So it sits tightly within the spacers, the Heim spacers here, or the bushing on the lower control arm here, just so there's no slop, of course. So they were in good enough condition, so I just kept them and I just wire wheeled them and got all the corrosion and rust off them, and then just put some paint on there. But I thought they were a little bit too specific for the application up front here, so I kept them. Didn't want to screw around with them. So if you're doing any sort of suspension work up front, I would think about that before you go buying any new hardware that isn't Nissan specific for this vehicle, or the same exact hardware from Nissan, I should say. All right, front's just about done here. Still a little, there's a little bit of surface rust on these hubs on each side. I might clean those up. Well, not I might, I will do that. And then still got to tighten this guy, and then tighten the ball joint here. Gonna leave the tie rod loose for now. Basically just getting it good enough to roll so I can get it to Select Speed Shop in a couple days so they can continue finishing the fab work on the fuel cell, and then also fabbing up a bracket for the seat on the driver's side. And then also a couple other little things, welding some bungs, some AN line, some dash 8, dash 10, dash 12 bungs on various things that I'm converting to AN lines. So making progress here. T-minus 4 weeks. I think I still got 4 weeks, maybe just 3 till grid life. So I'm gonna keep on pushing on. Hope we make it.